Welcome to it, folks. Tuesday edition of Step Up to the Mic, hour number 1. It is the second Tuesday of the month, and that means we've got some fine guests joining us on the telephone from the Schuylkill County Historical Society. Jim Halushka joins us. Jim, good morning and welcome as always, my friend.
Good morning, JC and Deb. Is Jerry with us?
Jerry is with us, yes.
Hey, Jerry. Happy New Year to all three of you.
He is looking
good morning.
Splendid this morning with his nice sweater vest working, his Rick Santorum look. But it is good to have you, Jim, on the program because you always provide some interesting and very informative guests, and I'm sure today is no exception.
I think it'll be an interesting show, that's for sure.
Yes.
Before we get to our guests, though, just a few cursory announcements about the society and various goings-on.
Sure.
First, next month in February, typically we have the History Fair up at the Fairlane Village Mall.
Right.
It's a big once-a-year deal where all the historical societies from across the county come out and display their wares and make a few bucks to keep going. But unfortunately, COVID. So I'm here to announce that the 2021 History Fair will not take place this year.
Oh.
But we are hopeful for 2022. We want to come back stronger than ever and show that, we're still here, we're still alive, and all the societies across the county are still going strong. So look for that in 2022. Also, here at the Society, during the months of January and February, we will not have Saturday hours. We'll just be here Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays from 10 to 4, no Saturday hours. We will resume them in March, though. So just a few notes before we get rolling with our guest. And let's get to Jim. This is a guy who's been a longtime friend of the Schuylkill County Historical Society. He loaned many things to us through the years, and he is just an overall great guy. Fortunately, he doesn't live in Schuylkill County anymore. He moved out to Colorado, but we still think fondly of the guy and hope he'll be able to visit us soon. Let me introduce to you Jim Wosochlo. Sorry about the pronunciation there.
That's okay.
Now, you have an extensive background here in Schuylkill County with the society and various organizations across the county and even with the state. You developed an interest in history and archaeology at a very early age. Maybe you could share how you got interested in archaeology at such a young age.
Well, when I was about 10 years old, I was helping my grandfathers, my step-grandfather and grandfather on the farm with farming, and my grandfather would find artifacts while we would be plowing the fields outside of Orixburg and Deer Lake, and then my step-grandfather, Lester Baver, kindly took me under his ropes and showed me how to find artifacts in the field and what they were. And then from there, I became president of the Lehigh Valley chapter of archaeology, and then eventually president of the SPA State Society for Pennsylvania Archaeology. And then we formed our own chapter down near the Hamburg area, Chapter 31. And I'm acting secretary of that as of now.
Very nice, very nice. And through all the artifacts you had on display here at the Society were really interesting pieces. But throughout your entire career, what is your favorite or your most valued artifact that you uncovered?
Well, one was a grouped axe that I found when I was about 10. Down on the family farm, but at the same site, I started finding stuff very deep underneath the plow zone that was about 10,000 years old.
Wow.
Transitional from the Clovis to LaCroix points. It was called a crow field, and it's the oldest known occupational site in Schuylkill County.
Oh, that's fair. That is something there, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you have a new endeavor, though. You just came out recently with your first book.
Yes, my
and
first
it is
novel.
a work of historical fiction based on true events of peculiar incidents that occurred right here in Schuylkill County back in the 1800s. And it's quite an interesting tale that we might have had a serial killer in our midst back in the day. So, Jim, why don't you set up a little bit about the novel? What inspired you to write this novel?
Well, two events inspired me about the novel. Was one that I didn't know about it until recently after talking to one of the bartenders at the Deer Lake Fire Company, of which I was former president of the Deer Lake Fire Company, Eric Yucko, and he was reading about it, and I was like, really, that's interesting. I didn't know about it. So I did a little bit looking into the tavern on Hawk Mountain Sanctuary, and I learned that there was a lot going on with that tavern since the French Indian War, when the Indians were raiding up and down the frontier on the Blue Mountain.
Sure.
The tavern was built in 1789 by Jacob Gerhardt. Now, Jacob's whole entire family was slaughtered during the 1750s during the French Indian War. He was the only child to escape, and he ran to a neighboring farm. And then he built that tavern in 1793, actually, and he kind of lived up there, as kind of like a hermit. And then in the 1850s, after it passed another owner, it was sold to Matthias Schambach, and it was rumored that he was murdering peddlers and travelers coming up over the mountain, but no one could really prove it. He almost was caught once when a peddler selling Civil War Army surplus went missing, and they saw Matthias selling the same items down in Reading, Pennsylvania, a week later. So they went after him to check it out, and they couldn't find no evidence. He did admit on his deathbed that he murdered 11 to 14 people before he lost count of dying dementia. And everyone assumed it as rumor, but when it was sold to William Turner and Ann Turner after his passing, they discovered the wells on the property was filled with human bones and remains. Excuse me. Now, it was rumored that there was some cannibalism going on up there as well, that he fed some of his guests to unknown guests. And they did kind of prove that because they found some of the bones were butchered.
So a forerunner of Sweeney Todd, for those who get the reference there. Well, how do woodsmen know, like when they're out in the field and they're exploring and they're looking for food, like why would somebody trust another person to board with or what have you? Because there's a certain element of trust that does go with staying with somebody, even in a tavern. But were there warning signs for the travelers that something might not be on the up and up there?
Well, back in those days, America just won its independence about 50 years earlier. People were coming into the country, migrating to new areas with new lives.
Sure.
And mostly everybody was traveling alone. They were using that route besides the canal systems and the railroads that were in function at that time. They were coming over that route to go to the Schuylkill County because a lot of the people migrating were finding work in the mines. So, and a lot of people actually were traveling alone. A lot of peddlers, young men, and, well, that tavern's location is the only tavern for at least 2 miles on each side on top of that mountain. And when you're traveling and you got a place to stay, you put your life in hands with a lot of people.
Sure. And I mean, you know, even the route north and south was fraught with dangers because you had bandits along the way too, and they could pose a very big hazard to unwary travelers. So how prevalent were canal bandits and highwaymen during this period of time?
Well, the canal bandits were phasing out and went off to other things to raid because the canals were dying out because the railroad was taking it over at that time, kind of competing it out of business.
Sure.
So they started raiding other areas, and you know, that's what where bushwhackers come from out west too, down south as well. But there was a lot of law enforcement around in the area at that time because they were trying to contain the grip of the Molly Maguires at that time.
Right.
So all the law enforcement was pulled out of all areas and was controlling those canals and railroads, and that's why Matthias was able to get away with a lot what he did.
Sure.
He was a very, very intelligent man to be able to not get caught. He was very picky on who he chose as victims, as in no witnesses. And he chose not to pick on people that were in the local area, and he would choose people that no one would miss. You know, a peddler comes through your area, and he's gone. He's, you know, you don't know what happened to him after that, and those were his victims.
Sure. Yeah, and definitely with the Mollies running around at the time, you know, that consumed the region that allowed Matthias to work in a certain amount of anonymity without attracting too much attention because of the Molly threat. So, yeah, another little footnote to the Molly saga there. Now, Matthias was married, actually. It might seem a little hard to believe. He was married to Margaret Schaumbach.
Yes, he was.
And how much did she know? How much evidence is there that she was an active participant in all of these goings-on with her husband?
Well, a lot of the research I did, it was hard to determine. There was no records kept on the murders, nothing written down. She stated that she had nothing to do with it or didn't know of it. But in a two-room tavern, I find it hard to believe. So eventually, I have it in the novel. She is aware.
Sure.
But yeah, it's I find it hard to believe that she would not know.
Right. Yeah. I mean, very little privacy at the time. So, but well, I guess it's one of those things where you're caught in between a rock and a hard place there.
Correct. Yep.
So you make mention of a gunstock war club in your book. And for those of our listeners out there who might not know what you're referring to when they get your book, could you explain what that is?
A gunstock war club is a Delaware Indian. It originated from the Delaware because when they would fight the settlers, you would fire your flintlock rifle and had one shot, and then you used it as a club. And the Frizzen area where the flint is was very effective at, they used it as a club. So the Indians adopted the style of wood that was shaped like a gunstock, but they put a blade on a corner of it. That made it more effective at killing. And Matthias, in the book, he does come across one that was left there from Jacob Gerhardt when he built the tavern. So there are some relics left over from 50 years from before from the previous owner when Matthias buys the tavern.
And how is the tavern today? Is it still there? Is it still functioning? Is this someplace curiosity seekers can stop by and check out?
Actually, I did get permissions from Hawk Mountain Sanctuary to take photographs of the tavern. However, and unfortunately at this time, the tavern is a private residence, and they don't want anybody really trespassing or going to the tavern to bother the tenant or owner that's in there now.
Okay.
So, yeah, unfortunately that's the case. But you can drive by and look at it as you're going down the south side to the tavern. I mean, from the sanctuary.
Jim, I know you have a website. Are those pictures available for people to see on your website or perhaps in the book itself?
There is a picture of the tavern of the book itself and inside the book itself. And, yeah, on the website you can also see pictures of the tavern.
So if people are curious, they can check it out without disturbing the current owners.
Yes, that's correct.
That's good to know.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And that's on WosochloBooks.com.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead. Give your website URL again.
It's WosochloBooks.com.
So for those of you who are interested in learning more, there you go. So why do you feel that he was never caught through all the murders, 11 to 14? You know, there may have been suspicions, but nobody could ever prove anything. Why was he so cunning?
Well, he had some factors going for him. He was smart enough to be choosy on who he chose as his victims. They had something of value to take the risk. And then once he was almost caught with Civil War peddler,
sure,
he quit. He stopped. He was able to stop himself from killing further. And, of course, no evidence. There was suspicion, lots of rumors, and that's where it stayed until he died. And then he finally confessed, but by that time, everybody thought it was just a lot of, folk tale.
Yeah.
But it was, obviously, they proved it when they found all the bones.
So, what, in terms of your course of researching this book, what clues did neighbors have that something just wasn't quite right over at the Schambach residence?
Well,
because there were clues, right?
There were clues. People would pass by. Some people heard some people. There was times people heard someone moaning or crying or asking for help. A couple once went to the tavern to board their horses in the barn and stay one night. And Matthias, when the horses reared up, the horses were uneasy, but when they opened up the barn doors, they noticed there was blood all over the straw on the floor. And they decided to leave, and they thought perhaps he butchered something there, obviously, but they didn't know if it was livestock, a bear. It could have been anything.
Right.
And then some individuals recall having sausage there, pork sausage. However, they noticed there was no livestock there, and it kind of tasted funny. Matthias was kind of an individual that was paranoia. He would yell at people who stared at him too long, chase them off. He would go off as he started to suffer dementia.
Yeah, so certainly there were signs of mental illness before it was really widely recognized and accepted as a legitimate thing that, you just didn't lock them away like had happened in the past. So, there's lots of different things going on here. Would you, in your research, do you believe that Matthias is America's first serial killer, or was there somebody before him even?
Well, it was early in America's history. I'm sure there were more. This was America's first undocumented serial killer, I would say, but he's definitely one of the first.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, even predates one of the more famous ones of H.H. Holmes and his murder palace out in Chicago. So, by a few decades there. So, all right. Did Matthias and Margaret have any children?
No, there are no children that are on record, though I did speculate that they did have a son, Ben, in the novel.
Okay.
There's a couple things I did speculate was how the murders were done, and I did speculate that they had a son, Ben. But there is no record of any children whatsoever.
So you say you speculated on how the murders occurred. Do you want to go into that a little bit there?
Yeah, I had to speculate the murders because there was no record, so I had to come up with ways of murdering somebody on top of that mountain. You know, like, for example, there's a bounty hunter. I won't get into the stories that much. He uses, obviously, the war club and things like that, even to the extent of poisonous mushrooms, because everybody around the Deer Lake area loves eating ram's head mushrooms in September. But you also got to be careful what kind of mushrooms you eat. And I have them feed of Hedler death cap mushrooms, which are very deadly mushrooms.
And how did they know which ones were safe and which ones were not?
Well, that's just like butchering and with families back in the day. That knowledge is passed down from generation to generation. My grandfathers and father taught me which mushrooms are safe to eat and which ones are not. Yep. So I mean, and back in those days, they had no FDA or anything like that for food.
Yeah.
But I do also mention in the book about how he uses. Ever hear of snake oil remedies? Those people that travel around with the small bottles of. They're actually morphine, cocaine, and heroin in those bottles. And back in the day, you know, mothers used to take that and put on teething babies and stuff like that. But if you drank too much of it, you would actually OD.
Right.
And a peddler comes. There's a chapter where a peddler comes along with that, and he uses that as to control his own pain, because it states in the research that he started beginning to talk to himself, yell at things in the mountain, and I incorporated that into the book as well. And he uses these snake oil remedy bottles to calm his pain that he was having.
Jim, this is Jerry. When you use the term peddler, do you mean beggar or somebody who was actually selling products?
Someone who's actually selling products. I don't think a beggar would want to be going to a tavern asking to stay for free. So they were mostly peddlers and lonely travelers. People who were selling things like salesmen, snake oil salesmen, or individuals like that, or someone who was actually on their way out west, because the frontier was opening further west at that time.
And I think that historically speaking, Jim, I think that's important for people to remember that this area was considered the wilds of Pennsylvania. There was really not very much here, was there? I mean, it wasn't a destination. It was a means to somewhere else.
The canals were important here at that time in the 1840s, 50s, and 60s because anthracite coal was the only place in School County. It was the only place in the new United States at that time in the 13 colonies, well, the 13 states then, and everything else was territories. But anthracite coal was the biggest thing for industry happening down around Philadelphia and Delaware. And they actually had a canal system that came up here for that. But, yes, it was very wild at that time. During the French-Indian War, this was the frontier.
Sure. Hence
the forts all along the Blue Mountain there, Fort Henry, Fort Franklin, all the way out to...
Fort Lebanon.
Yep. So it was not a happy place in 1750s. The Red Church was burned down twice. Sculp's Hill was a rendezvous point for the Indians, and there was a lot of raiding going back and forth. Hence, Jacob Gerhardt, who built the tavern, I mean, his whole entire family was slaughtered, and along with the Diefendorfers at that time, and the Adams out in Pine Grove. The Indians came down here, and they actually shot the children, the women, and the men, and burned the grain and the livestock because they were allied to the French.
We're going to take a quick break. Very interesting. We're going to come back with more Step Up to the Mic as we continue with folks from the Schuylkill County Historical Society here on WPPA, AM 1360, 106 FM, and of course on the web worldwide at WPPAradio.com. Welcome back to Step Up to the Mic on WPPA, AM 1360, 106 FM, and of course worldwide on the web at WPPAradio.com. Second Tuesday of the month in our first hour. That means we've got folks from the Schuylkill County Historical Society on the telephone with us, Jim Holushka and company. Jim, welcome back, my friend, following the break.
Thank you very much. Always good to be here, like I say.
Yes.
All right, so let's continue with this sort of tale of one of the first documented serial killers in American history, Matthias Schambach. And Jim, if we could, there's so much that we take for granted in our modern society. We take for granted that we're going to be protected, and safe, and not have to really look over our shoulders. But, this was a time where that wasn't taken for granted, was it?
No, it wasn't. At that time, excuse me, in this part of Schuylkill County was you can say the Wild West frontier. A lot of the territories were west of us, like Ohio. Everybody in the 1840s was moving out for the gold rush. And there was a lot of crime going, organized crime actually, at that time with the Molly McGuires. You can most likely, according to this occurrence, you can get away with murder. So it was a lot of things were taken for granted in this area at that time. So say I would come into New York City and I wanted to explore the new world, and I traveled past Matthias's tavern and stayed there with a lot of my belongings that I had my whole life packed on my horse with me. And if they were valuable enough, well, no one would know it. No one would see me again. I didn't document where I was going, so
sure.
Yeah, it was quite wild.
I think that's hard for us to understand in our modern society. People were very transient, and it would not be unusual for someone perhaps on a journey like that just to disappear and never be heard from again.
Right. I mean, people would come in here and in hopes of new land and new life. So to do that, you had to come from the coast to past this area of Pennsylvania to get out west. Most of the areas here were owned by by farmers that had large tracts of land, and it was already somewhat taken at the time. So they were traveling on through to find a new life, and most of them didn't make it.
And certainly some of them were on the run from crimes they had committed down in the big city or in another community as well. So that also could complicate travels, because you never knew who you were passing by.
Well, actually, more than that, when they were traveling west, a lot of people were escaping even religious prosecution, things like that. And they had their own views, and they wanted to find a land where they can live their lives the way they wanted to.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Now, you mentioned during the break about Matthias's funeral and how that was an interesting story in itself. Would you care to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I left Matthias's funeral out of the book, but what happened was when he was being buried on the Berks County side, during his funeral there was a large lightning strike near the pallbearers, and it scared them so bad that when they were burying Matthias, they dropped his coffin, and they actually buried him upside down.
Oh. And where's he interred at?
He was interred at down on the Berks County side near Albany.
Okay.
I don't want to say the church, because actually what happened probably about 10 years ago, someone actually stole his headstone.
Oh, jeez.
So, yeah, I didn't want to get into too much exactly where he was buried, but I know it's down near New Albany area. And that's one of the reasons I left it out, because I don't want, I want to protect the wishes of Hawk Mountain Sanctuary and the tavern, because I don't want people, trespassing and stealing.
Right. You always have those curiosity seekers who, just sometimes take it a little bit too far, and you want to avoid those awkward situations. So, if for anybody who's out there who wants to go check it out, it's important to remember to be respectful of everybody involved.
Mm-hmm. Over the years, it's become a legend, kind of like a ghost story. So a lot of the curious are into those things and want to go check it out. And it's sad that someone would steal a headstone.
Yeah. But you get people who, in their quest of history or curiosity, they unfortunately take it a step too far, and it just goes back to we have to respect.
Mm-hmm.
Jim, earlier in the conversation, you mentioned the wells on the property. Has there been much excavation over the years of that area?
No. There were actually no excavations over there at the time, because it became property of previous owners. Mm-hmm. I do know that there were 4 wells on the property, all of them of which contained human remains and bones. So it's most likely he did commit more than 14 to 11 murders. It's just that because of the dementia, he lost count.
Right.
But I know when they did discover that, they cleaned out all the wells, if not filled in the others. Back in those times, I'm sure the sheriff, the local authorities were so busy with other issues. Mm-hmm. It sounded, with the research, it sounded like they just wanted to clean up and cover up and let it pass on in history.
Would that be unusual for a property to have 4 wells or more? Or is that...
I would say so, and the reason I think he built 4 wells is because, he knew what he was throwing in the others. And I kind of explain it in the book, the reason why he put the skulls down the wells. Because back in those days, no one went to school for anatomy. It was lucky if anybody graduated from a school at all, or went to school, or could read. So, like out west here, you're traveling out in the prairie or in the woods out here, you see bones laying there, and it's a deer or an elk or something like that, and I'm sure it was the same case in Pennsylvania at that time. But when you come across a skull, that's a different story. Mm-hmm. Everyone knows what a human skull looks like. So he mostly put a lot of the skulls down the wells and dismembered and distributed the bodies throughout the property for the animals to clean up and take away. And that's what he did. When they did find out that the bones were in the wells, they searched the property and they're finding dismembered bones throughout and cut apart bones throughout the property eventually. Mm-hmm. And he would dig one well and not use it and go to and dig another well. And they were deep wells. They're like 12 feet deep wells, because there's a spring right there behind the tavern where the water would come from. But the previous owner, the owner that bought it after Matthias' passing, did not like the taste of the water of the well that he thought was good drinking water. So he went down and checked it out, and that's when they discovered it full of bones. But yeah, usually 1 or 2 wells at most are on properties.
Sure.
But there was actually 4 there at that little tavern.
Can you talk about what it was like to research this book?
Well, yeah, it was like opening up a can of worms. It was surprising that all this actually went on, and most people just kept it, because it couldn't be really proven. The locals, it was surprising how the locals kept it to themselves. Like, look, don't go up there and everything. But they didn't really warn. I guess they couldn't either of any transients going up that way. But I did write in a book about maybe the locals hiring a bounty hunter to go check it out. But I'm surprised there was no one who got together like a vigilante and go up there and say, hey, knock it off or lynch them.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that keeps going through my head is so often communities police themselves.
Correct.
And, if they knew something was up, that they would form as a community and go up to stop it, so that it never happened in all that time is pretty astonishing to me. You would think that the community would come together and say stop, but I guess maybe they thought to themselves, well, he's not killing off us, so look the other way. Would that be a fair assessment?
Well, I did put in there, there is a chapter where I have in there where they do hire a bounty hunter to go check it out. And, of course, I don't want to give away that chapter, but it's a really good one. And it just never pans out for them, so that they let it go into history when they find out he's passing away, and the local community's like, oh, well, thank God this is over now. Let it go. And it's forgotten.
Do you think that's why he was never caught? Just because there was no real interest locally in the crimes?
He had to be a big, intimidating man. And research showed that he was a large, intimidating person. And I'm sure if anyone ever confronted him, he would definitely go after him. Because people would travel by that were that suspected him of foul play, and they would heckle him and hassle him, but he would come charging out of the tavern yelling, waving a hatchet, things like that. And that's actually in written history, research of for the novel.
And so you have a large, imposing man, coupled with obvious mental health issues, and that's, talk about the proverbial hornet's nest that you just don't want to stir up, too.
Right, correct. Everybody was kind of afraid of them, and the locals, when they would go past, they'd be in a hurry to get past, and then when they got past it, they took a deep breath and continued, if they had to travel that way.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Well,
I could see how his motive was that way because, you have a one-room tavern. How are you going to make enough money to live? Mm-hmm. Just renting out one room, and it's too rocky up there to grow crops or anything to sell.
Right.
So that was another reason and motive for him to do what he did.
Did they ever find any artifacts or belongings of victims of Matthias around the farm, besides obviously the skulls?
No, I do have it listed in there that it has a little stash, and I list in the book that I made that up. So I don't have treasure hunters around there.
Yeah.
The only thing that is in written history or in research is that when they discovered the bones, all they found was bones throughout the property, because you got to remember, them bones were there for about 20 years before they were discovered.
Sure.
And anything organic would have rotted away.
Right.
But yeah, that was it. Just the skulls and some bones in the wells, along with maybe some unwanted artifacts were found in the wells.
Mm-hmm.
But throughout the property and on the benches on the mountainside were a bone here, a bone there. Everything was pulled apart, or if not, taken away by scavengers.
Sure. Well, I'll tell you, it sounds like an interesting read, and I can't wait to get my copy to dive into it. So for those who are interested, they can get a copy of their own on Amazon or Barnes and Nobles, or wherever books are sold. Right?
Correct. Yep. No, Amazon seems to be where they're being sold prevalently.
And 5-star reviews as well. So there's a lot of fans out there who appreciate that story that you did put together.
Yeah. Thank you.
And we should mention again that the book is called Appalachian, Shambaugh's Tavern by James Wosochlo. What's next for you, Jim?
Well, I'm actually writing a second novel, but it's not about a true story. But I'm actually having fun doing a second novel. I also want to put my email address out there for anybody who wants to join any of the archaeological societies, and the email is Jim, J-I-M, Wosochlo, W-O-S-O-C-H-L-O, gmail.com.
And why don't you maybe go into, what organizations you do belong to and when they meet and how they plan events together.
Well, right now there are no events because of COVID, but anybody who reaches me can become a state member through the SPA, State Society of Pennsylvania Archaeology, and we have a meeting once a year out in throughout the state.
Mm.
And the local chapter in Hamburg, Chapter 31, and Lehigh Valley Chapter 14.
Mm.
And if you reach me at that email address, jimwosochlo@gmail.com, I could hook you up with joining those chapters. But yeah, because of COVID, we're not meeting right now.
Right. Yeah. COVID again put a damper on a lot of plans.
Mm-hmm.
I know, with the society again. Unfortunately, the 2021 History Fair has been canceled until next year. Safety first, and we don't want to add to the problems. So that's why we made the tough decision that we did.
Uh-huh.
But, there's always next year, right, folks?
Absolutely, absolutely. Jim, any words of wisdom for aspiring writers out there?
Well, if you're going to write a book, enjoy it. Write about something that you enjoy. I love kind of mystery, thrillers, horror books, and normally, so it was actually fun using, being creative to come up with 11 to 14 murders in this book. So have fun doing it.
Yeah, I think that's important for anybody in any writer is enjoying what you do, being interested in what you do, because it just makes I think it makes the finished product all the more encapsulating.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, definitely.
I do want to add in one thing. Sorry, Jim.
Sure.
With the book right now in Philadelphia, I have some agents because I did some background acting in Creed 2, 21 Bridges, and Saints of Newark, a Sopranos prequel.
Mm.
And they are actually getting together with me to do a teaser trailer of the novel. So it'll actually be like a movie trailer for the novel that we'll be filming in Philadelphia this spring. And that said, I can't say who it is, but there is an individual who, a well-known movie producer, who has actually requested a copy of the novel to read and consider for 2023 making a film out of it.
And that'll be posted on your website as well when it comes out, right?
Yes, it will be.
And people can check that out where?
At WosochloBooks.com.
Okay. So, all right. Any last thoughts, Jim, before we go and I wrap things up and make a few closing announcements?
No, I don't. But I do miss home.
We miss you around the society too. As I mentioned at the top of the show, you were a steadfast friend of the society for many years. You loaned many of your archaeological finds to the society, and there's a hole missing from the stuff that you had on loan for many years here. We miss you. We miss your artifacts. That's for sure.
Thank you.
So
All
of course
right.
we encourage.
So you can check that book out from Amazon or Barnes and Nobles. You got the contact information for Jim if you wanted to get involved in the various archaeological organizations that he belongs to. It's a great read for sure, and I can't wait to get my copy. So thank you very much for coming on today.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Deb.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so there's just a few final announcements about the society before we wrap it up. Number one, it may be January, but our annual appeal campaign is still ongoing. We're doing really well this year. The community has really responded to this year's appeal, especially with our push to get the money together to put windows in our building. It's been an issue for a while. We have several boarded up windows on our Race Street side, and it's important now more than ever for your annual appeals to be sent in. Whatever you can afford, you can go to our website at www.schuylkillhistory.org and click on the donate button. You could learn more through our Facebook page, or you can just stop on down, and we will be more than happy to answer your questions during normal business hours. Once again, during the months of January and February, we don't have Saturday hours. We are here Wednesday, Thursday, Friday from 10 to 4, but Saturday hours not until March. We also, our gift shop is open and our museum is open. The restrictions that curtailed our museum is lifted, so you can come down and check out our Prohibition exhibit or Women's Suffrage exhibit or our Civil War gallery. The Prohibition exhibit we just did a small revamp on to bring it more alive. So if you've been to our Prohibition exhibit, you'll want to come down again and check out the new and updated changes we made. You could it's $5 a person to check out our galleries, or if you're a member, free of charge. And if you want, you can also come down to the society and get your yearly membership for as little as $25 per person. You get a bi-monthly newsletter. You get discounts to our gift shop, and once we start programming again, you'll get free or discounted rates for our programs as well. So come on down and support the society. And we look forward to seeing everyone in 2021, hopefully under better times.
Most definitely.
Amen. Amen to that, Jim. Yes.
So once again, Happy New Year to all our friends here in Schuylkill County and beyond. And, of course, you three great people who I thoroughly enjoy talking to every month.
We do the same exactly,
you,
Jim. Always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much. Great job once again. We'll talk to you again next month. Jim Halushka from the Schuylkill County Historical Society. You can catch them on the second Tuesday of the month in our first hour.
And just remember that the historical fair next month, usually here in Pottsville at the Fairlane Village Mall, it has been postponed until 2022. And if you want more information on that book, it's WosochloBooks.com, WOSOCHLO.